You know how some families have cute traditions? Like pancake breakfasts on birthdays or dad pretending he forgot your special day before whipping out a surprise gift? Yeah, we had traditions too, just a little different. In my house, my birthday was basically Oscar Appreciation Day. Every single year. The first time it happened, I was 5. I remember because I still had faith in people. I woke up giddy, thinking this was finally the year they'd get me the red bicycle I'd circled in the Sears catalog. I even made a sign for the kitchen that said, "It's my birthday!" in glitter glue. Mom glanced at it while pouring her organic, sugar-free, happiness-free coffee and said, "Oh, that's today? Sweetie, Oscar has that soccer game, remember? We'll celebrate later." Spoiler, we did not celebrate later. The older I got, the more creative the sabotage became. When I turned 10, I invited 3 classmates over for cake. Halfway through singing Happy Birthday, Dad rolled in a brand new gaming console for Oscar. My cake was left to dry out on the table while everyone crowded around my little brother, who was only 7, as he unwrapped my dream gift. At 12, I got a $20 Target gift card. Oscar? A dirt bike. By 14, I stopped throwing parties. Why waste the effort? I'd just sit in my room with a stale cupcake and a growing sense of existential dread while the family threw an Oscar extravaganza in the backyard. The crowning moment of absurdity happened when Oscar turned 12 and they bought him a car. A car. Sure, it was. Just for practice, they said while I tried to figure out how to afford a bus pass. They parked it in the driveway with a red bow big enough to choke a horse. Mom was sobbing like he'd cured cancer. Dad clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Son, you deserve this." I watched from the porch. Clapping, too, because sarcasm was the only thing I could afford. But I think the day I finally understood the full depth of their twisted favoritism was my 16th birthday. I'd spent weeks dropping hints that I needed help with college savings. Scholarships were nice in theory, but in practice, I'd have to sell organs on the dark web to cover tuition. So I did it. I sat them down, like a hostage negotiator, and tried to be mature. I asked if they'd consider contributing even a little to my college fund. They laughed. Dad said, "College isn't for everyone, son. Maybe you should consider trades. Oscar will probably need help managing all his success one day." Then Mom tilted her head like she was regarding a particularly stupid goldfish and said, "Oscar's happiness should be enough of a gift for you." I wish I could say I stormed out or flipped the table. But the truth? I just nodded, went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the floor, realizing these people would never love me the way they loved him. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was how routine it had all become. At 16, I knew exactly where I stood. A warm body they could point at and say, "See? We have another kid. The invisible one." But if life had taught me anything, it was that sometimes the best revenge isn't explosive. It's patient, silent, and it starts the day you stop begging to be chosen. I used to think there was a limit to how much embarrassment you could feel in a single lifetime. Like surely there had to be a tap-out point, some cosmic referee who would step in and say, "Okay, that's enough, this kid's had his quota." Apparently, I was wrong. It happened the night of Oscar's college acceptance party. You'd think he got into NASA, the way my parents went on about it. They rented a country club ballroom, invited everyone with a pulse, and hired a live band to play background music while people pretended to be impressed. I walked in late on purpose, hoping I could lurk near the buffet and stay invisible. No such luck. The second I slipped through the door, Mom's hawk eyes locked onto me. She gave me a little wave, more like a shooing motion, and turned back to her circle of acquaintances, probably explaining that I was the artistic one, which is family code for the disappointing spare child. The evening was already a nauseating parade of Oscar worship. Tables draped in blue and gold. Giant banners with his face airbrushed to an unsettling level of porelessness. And a cake so big it looked like a geological formation. I tried to focus on the free shrimp cocktail, but then Dad climbed onto the stage. He tapped the microphone and gave the crowd his best statesman smile. "Friends, family, Thank you all for coming to celebrate our brilliant son, Oscar. There was scattered applause. My stomach turned. Dad continued, We've always said Oscar is the son we never had. The room laughed. I didn't. I felt something inside me crack, some delicate thing I'd been patching together with denial and sarcasm. And to show how much we believe in him, Dad went on, we're covering his full tuition. And, he paused for effect, like he was announcing the winner of a reality show. We've purchased a house for him to live in while he studies. People gasped. Someone actually said, Oh my God! I swallowed so hard it hurt. My brain was a swirling mess of thoughts. What about me? What about the times I begged for help with application fees? The textbooks I couldn't afford? The fact I'd been told repeatedly there was no money? Oscar beamed from his seat. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a cocktail napkin like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. I don't know what came over me, but I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I started recording, panning slowly across the room, the balloons, the smug faces, my parents in their element. Then, without thinking, I walked up to the stage. Hey, I said, my voice cracking like a teenager whose body hadn't gotten the memo that puberty was over. Quick question, where was all this when I applied to college? Silence. The kind of silence that feels alive, heavy, crawling across your skin. Dad's smile vanished. Not now, he hissed under his breath, leaning toward me. Why not now? I said louder. Why is Oscar's education worth a house and mine wasn't worth $50? Mom tried to pull me aside. You're ruining this for your brother. Good, I snapped. Oscar stood up, face red. You're just jealous. I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound I didn't recognize. You think? That's when it happened. Dad's hand shot out and cracked across my cheek so hard I tasted blood. Someone screamed. The whole room went into a collective inhale, like the crowd before the main act at a concert. I stood there, cheek burning, phone still in my hand, recording every second. Dad's face was pale. His hand shook. I locked eyes with him. You really just did that? I turned, walked straight out the door, and into the parking lot. My heart was hammering so loud I could barely hear the click of my car unlocking. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there shaking. Then I looked at the video. The toast. The laughter. The slap. All of it. I uploaded it to Facebook. No caption. Just raw footage. Then, because I was done being the family embarrassment in private, I posted it everywhere else. Twitter. Instagram. Even LinkedIn, because why not? If I was going to burn every bridge, I wanted everyone to see the flames. When I got home, my notifications were exploding. Friends, old teachers, random acquaintances, hundreds of messages, all saying the same thing. I'm so sorry. This is unbelievable. I always wondered if something was going on. I lay in bed, phone buzzing on the pillow next to me, and realized I wasn't invisible anymore. I was undeniable. And for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt free. It's amazing how fast the narrative flips when the internet gets receipts. By breakfast, the video of my dad slapping me had thousands of views. My inbox was flooded with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Are you okay? Your parents are monsters. I always knew something was off. Meanwhile, my parents were in damage control meltdown. 14 missed calls. A string of texts that read like bad PR statements. Mom. Sweetheart, you're overreacting. Dad. Take the video down immediately. Oscar. Way to ruin everything. Oscar's was almost funny. He'd spent his life being the main character, so of course he thought my pain was about him. 2 days later, Grandpa called. He never called. His voice was calm, but there was a steel I hadn't heard before. Come over tomorrow, he said. We need to talk. When I walked into their house, Grandma hugged me so tight my ribs popped. Grandpa sat at the table, hands folded. We watched the video, he said. I braced for scolding. Instead, I've never been more ashamed of your parents. I blinked. What? We saw the favoritism, Grandma said softly. But we didn't realize how deep it went. A lump formed in my throat. For once, someone saw it without me explaining. Grandpa continued. We're calling a family meeting. Tonight. You'll come with us. That evening felt surreal. Like a reality show called Family Implosion Live. The meeting was at Oscar's favorite restaurant, because of course it was. Mom looked like she'd aged a decade. Dad wouldn't look up. Oscar glared at his phone, probably texting Satan for advice. Grandpa didn't bother with pleasantries. You will apologize to this boy, properly, or we remove you from our will tomorrow. Silence. Mom opened her mouth, closed it. Dad looked ready to protest, then deflated. Oscar rolled his eyes. This is ridiculous. Grandma turned to him, voice low. Enough. You've been part of this. Dad finally spoke. We're sorry. For everything. It sounded like he was reading lines off a crumpled cue card. Mom dabbed her eyes. We didn't mean to hurt you. Oscar didn't say a word. Just sneered. I stared at them. That's it. Grandpa looked at me. You'll come live with us. Finish school. We'll help. No one had ever offered to help me. Not once. I nodded, voice gone. Then that's settled, Grandpa said, standing. Mom tried to speak again, but Grandpa cut her off. And don't think this is over. We're still removing you from the will. Her face crumpled. Real grief, but only for her bank account. As I left with Grandma and Grandpa, a strange calm settled in. I wasn't the family scapegoat anymore. That night, as I unpacked in their spare bedroom, Grandma brought cocoa. About time someone took care of you, she said, kissing my forehead. I lay awake replaying it all. And for once, when the memories came, they didn't taste like shame. They tasted like the start of something better. Moving in with my grandparents felt like stepping into a parallel universe, one where no one weaponized your existence to prop up their golden child. For the first time, I woke up to the smell of pancakes instead of passive aggression. Grandpa slipped me cash for textbooks. Grandma asked if I was warm enough at night. It was almost embarrassing how foreign kindness felt. But peace is a fragile thing in my family. And apparently Oscar decided he wasn't finished being the main character. It started small, so small we almost missed it. One Sunday, we all went to lunch at this little Italian place Grandma loved. She ordered her usual, chicken piccata, extra lemon. Midway through the meal, she excused herself, saying her stomach felt off. Probably the sauce, Grandpa muttered. But by the time we got home, Grandma was pale and shaking. That night, she collapsed in the hallway. I called 911 while Grandpa tried to wake her up. Watching the EMTs wheel her out, I felt that same helpless fury I'd known all my life, like I was a spectator in a catastrophe no one else seemed to notice. Hours later, in the ICU waiting room, the doctor told us she'd ingested a massive quantity of an industrial-strength laxative, enough to dehydrate her to the point of organ failure. I stared at him, numb. Are you saying someone put that in her food? He hesitated. We can't rule it out. Grandpa went quiet in that scary way old men do when they're plotting something. Over the next few days, Grandma stabilized, but the questions didn't. The restaurant insisted they never had anything like that in their kitchen. The timing was too convenient. Oscar had been at the lunch, of course. Sitting across from Grandma, making polite conversation like he wasn't the same guy who'd called me pathetic 2 weeks earlier. I kept replaying the memory of him watching her plate, just for a second, his eyes flicking to her glass. When Grandpa got home from the hospital, he didn't say much. Just went into his study and started making calls. By the end of the week, he'd hired a private investigator, Catherine, a woman with the energy of a bloodhound who'd skipped breakfast. She interviewed the restaurant staff, reviewed security footage, and took samples from the kitchen. I tried to stay out of the way. But the more I thought about it, the more something curdled in my gut. This wasn't just an accident. And I knew exactly who was behind it. 2 nights later, Catherine came over with a laptop. She set it on the kitchen table and clicked play on a grainy video. There was Oscar, in his preppy little polo, slipping behind the restaurant kitchen. He emerged a minute later, wiping his hands on a napkin. Catherine paused the video. He claimed he went to look for the bathroom. Grandpa's jaw clenched. That's not where the bathrooms are. We sat in stunned silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'd known Oscar was entitled. Vindictive. Cruel. But this was something darker. The next morning, Grandma woke up enough to talk. Her voice was paper thin, but she managed a sentence that made my blood run cold. He watched me eat, she whispered. Like he was waiting. I don't remember much after that. Just the taste of bile in my mouth and the thought thudding in my head. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Grandma came home from the hospital with a feeding tube and a new rule: no food in the house unless Grandpa or I prepared it. You'd think that would be enough to deter Oscar. You'd think almost killing your grandmother would be a wake-up call. But apparently my brother's ego was more durable than Grandma's kidneys. It started with the phone calls. Blocked numbers. No one speaking on the other end. Just breathing. Sometimes they'd hang up after a few seconds. Other times they'd linger, like they were daring me to say something. Then came the notes. They'd show up in the mailbox, typed in all caps. She doesn't deserve it. You can't keep her safe. This house should have been mine. I'd read them, my stomach twisting, and then watch Grandpa crumple them with hands that trembled more every day. Catherine installed cameras inside and outside the house. Motion sensors. Extra locks. Grandpa even started sleeping on the sofa near Grandma's bedroom, a baseball bat propped against the coffee table. Some nights, I'd lie awake listening for footsteps, heart thudding so loud I was sure it'd wake the neighbors. It felt absurd, like we were characters in a thriller no one asked to star in. Then, one Wednesday at 2 a.m., the motion alert pinged my phone. I sat bolt upright and clicked the feed. Oscar. Standing in the kitchen. Not moving. Just watching. He'd come in through the side door. The one Grandpa used when he took out the trash. For a second, I thought maybe he'd realized what he was doing. That he'd turn around, leave, and pretend he'd never been there. Instead, he opened the fridge. Pulled out a water bottle. Unscrewed the cap and pulled something from his pocket, a vial of clear liquid. He poured it in, replaced the cap, and set the bottle back like nothing had happened. I stared at the screen, my entire body frozen. Catherine's voice crackled through the tiny speaker she'd installed in my room. Do not go downstairs. I'm calling the police. I watched Oscar glance around one last time, then slip back out the door. It took the cops 13 minutes to arrive. By then, he was long gone. They tested the water the next day. Antifreeze. If Grandma had drunk it, she would have died. Grandpa didn't say a word. Just sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. I stood there, feeling something snap inside me. Fear had carried me this far, but it wasn't going to carry me any further. That night I wrote Oscar an email. Subject: I see you. Body: you can stop hiding. We both know who you are now. I didn't send it. Not because I was scared. Because I wanted him to wonder if I would. 3 days after the antifreeze incident, Grandpa called a family meeting. Again. Only this time, it wasn't in a restaurant. It was in his living room, under the same crooked painting of a ship in a storm that had been hanging there since before I was born. Seemed fitting. When I walked in, Oscar was already there. He sat on the sofa like he owned it, one leg crossed over the other, tapping his phone like this was all some minor inconvenience. Mom and Dad flanked him, Mom wringing her hands, Dad staring at the carpet. Neither of them would look at me. Grandma was in her recliner, bundled in blankets. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. Catherine stood off to the side with a laptop and a stack of files. Grandpa didn't waste time. He gestured to Catherine. Go ahead. She connected the laptop to the TV and pulled up the footage, Oscar standing in the kitchen, pouring poison into a water bottle. No one spoke. The video ended. Oscar didn't blink. That's edited. Grandpa's jaw clenched. Don't insult our intelligence. Oscar leaned back. I'm serious. Anyone could have faked that. You were caught on camera. I said, voice shaking. We know it was you. He finally looked at me. His eyes were flat. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? You've always acted like the victim. I didn't try to kill my grandmother. I snapped. So yeah, I think that makes me better. Mom put a hand on Oscar's arm. Sweetheart, just tell the truth. He yanked away from her like she'd burned him. There's nothing to tell. Catherine set a stack of journals on the coffee table. These were recovered from your apartment, Mr. Harrington. They detail every attempt you planned. The poisoning. The intimidation. Even a plan to make it look like an accident. Oscar's face drained of color. Those aren't mine. Grandpa didn't even flinch. Your handwriting. Your signature. Your obsession. Oscar's mouth opened-closed. Then he shoved himself to his feet, pointing at me. This is your fault. You've been poisoning them against me for years. I laughed, a sharp, humorless bark. You did that all by yourself. Mom started crying, mascara smudging down her cheeks. Please, Oscar. We can fix this. Just admit it. He turned to her with a snarl. Shut up. The room went silent. It was like every mask he'd ever worn fell off all at once. Grandma's voice broke the quiet. I know it was you. Oscar froze. You watched me eat, she said, her voice soft but unyielding. I remember your face. He looked like he was going to say something, some final excuse, but then his shoulders slumped. And he started to cry. Not quiet, dignified tears, ugly, gasping sobs that made the whole performance feel hollow. Mom reached for him again. He shoved her hand away and crumpled back onto the couch. Grandpa looked at Catherine. Call the police. Oscar's head snapped up, eyes wild. No. You can't do this. I'm your son. Grandpa's expression didn't waver. And you tried to kill my wife. For a second, the room felt smaller than I'd ever known it. Then Dad finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I believed him. But I also didn't care. The officers came 20 minutes later. They read Oscar his rights while he sobbed into his hands. As they let him out, he looked back at me. This isn't over, he said, voice hoarse. I didn't respond. Because for the first time, it felt like it actually was. After Oscar was hauled off in handcuffs, I thought we'd finally get a break. Maybe we'd all catch our breath, start to heal. But monsters don't evaporate just because you drag them into daylight. The first week was eerily quiet. Grandpa changed every lock. Catherine installed new cameras, higher resolution, cloud backups, motion alerts that pinged our phones every time a raccoon sneezed in the yard. Grandma tried to pretend she wasn't rattled, but I'd catch her double-checking the deadbolts, her hands trembling. Then, the phone calls started again. Blocked numbers. Raspy breathing. No words. Catherine traced the calls. They were coming from a prepaid burner phone registered under a fake name. Oscar had an accomplice. One night, Grandpa and I were sitting in the living room when the landline rang, old-fashioned, shrill. Grandpa picked it up, put it on speaker. A male voice crackled through the static. I'll be seeing you soon. Then a click. Grandma was in tears. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. The next morning, Catherine sat us down. Legally, he's in jail, she said, her mouth a grim line. But he's been making calls to someone outside. A cousin, maybe a friend. Someone willing to do this for him. It didn't feel real. It felt like a bad thriller I couldn't turn off. That afternoon, I walked into Grandma's room to bring her tea, and the bed was empty. My heart stopped. I checked the bathroom, the kitchen, the backyard. Nothing. Then I saw the note taped to the fridge. Bring the inheritance papers, or you won't see her again. For a second, everything inside me just shut off. Then adrenaline kicked in. I called Grandpa, who was at the bank. He came home faster than I thought humanly possible. Catherine arrived minutes later, her jaw clenched, already dialing the FBI. It was surreal, watching federal agents sweep the house, ask us the same questions over and over. When did you last see her? Did she say anything unusual? Who might help him? I pulled up the camera feeds. At 2:12 p.m., a man in a hoodie slipped through the back gate. He moved straight to Grandma's bedroom. At 2:14, he walked out, carrying her. Grandpa put a hand over his mouth. I thought he was going to collapse. By nightfall, the FBI had set up a command post in our living room. Computers. Maps. Phones buzzing constantly. I just sat on the stairs, feeling like a kid again, useless, terrified, watching the adults try to fix something unfixable. Then my phone buzzed. A photo. Grandma, tied to a chair in what looked like an abandoned garage. Her face bruised. Eyes swollen. The caption. Midnight. Bring everything. I showed Catherine. She didn't flinch. We'll set a trap, she said. We're going to get her back. Midnight felt 1,000 years away. At 11:45, I rode with Catherine and a team of agents in an unmarked van. Grandpa stayed behind, he'd insisted, but I could see the shame in his eyes. We pulled up to the warehouse district. Catherine gave me a look I'll never forget. You did everything right, she said. This isn't your fault. It didn't feel like it. Agents fanned out. Radios crackled. I held my breath. At 12:06, they stormed the building. Shouts. Heavy boots. Then a voice called out. We have her. I sprinted toward the door as they led Grandma out, wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at me, dazed, and whispered, He said you did this. I hugged her, tears burning my eyes. No, I said. He did. Oscar was arrested the morning after Grandma came home. He didn't struggle when the agents cuffed him. Didn't say a word. He just stared at the floor, eyes dull and vacant like he'd finally realized there was no more charm left to weaponize. The trial began 2 months later. It was the kind of spectacle that made headlines in the local paper. Family betrayal exposed in chilling kidnapping case. I sat with Grandpa and Grandma every day, wearing the same suit I'd borrowed for job interviews. The courtroom smelled like old wood polish and stale air conditioning. Oscar's lawyer tried to spin it all as a mental health crisis. But no one bought it. They played the video of him in our kitchen, pouring antifreeze into Grandma's water. They showed the journals Catherine found in his apartment, page after page of scribbled plans. Dosages. Schedules. Even a list titled, If they won't give it to me, take it. Mom testified, sobbing so hard the judge had to call a recess. She kept glancing at me like I'd somehow fix it all by saying nothing happened. Dad claimed he was blindsided, but even he couldn't make his voice sound convincing. When Grandma took the stand, she didn't cry. He watched me, she said steadily. He wanted me to die so he could have the money. I loved him anyway. That was my mistake. I don't think I've ever been prouder of anyone in my life. When it was my turn, I stood, palms sweating, heart thumping so hard it drowned out everything else. I told them how it felt to grow up invisible. To have every birthday, every achievement, every scrap of affection handed to Oscar instead. I described the notes. The break-ins. The moment I saw my brother on camera poisoning the person who'd shown me what a family was supposed to be. Oscar never looked up. But when I sat back down, I felt something I hadn't known I was missing. Closure. The prosecution laid it out so simply, so brutally. Premeditation. Attempted murder. Kidnapping. Extortion. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they came back, the forewoman didn't even glance in Oscar's direction. Guilty on all counts. Grandma gripped my hand so tight her knuckles went white. The judge asked if Oscar wanted to say anything before sentencing. He finally lifted his head, eyes red-rimmed but dry. This isn't over, he whispered. His voice wasn't angry anymore. Just hollow. And for the first time, I realized he was right. Some part of this would never be over. But that didn't mean he'd get to finish the story. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison. No possibility of parole until he was almost 50. His accomplice got 30. Mom covered her face and sobbed. Dad looked like he was going to be sick. And me? I just felt done. Afterward, I walked Grandma to the car. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, You saved my life. But the truth was, she'd saved mine first. 6 months later, life was almost quiet again. Grandma planted a new rose bush in the front yard. She said it was to prove something could still grow in the wreckage. Grandpa started volunteering at the library. Me? I finally applied to college again. Grandpa handed me the check for tuition like it was the most normal thing in the world. No lectures. No conditions. Just love. The day before I moved into the dorms, Grandma hugged me on the porch. "You're not leaving," she said softly. "You're just starting." I still get letters from Oscar's prison. Mostly rambling, half-apologetic nonsense. I don't read them anymore. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, especially the ones he set on fire. I'm not angry. Not really. Just finished. Last week, I drove past my parents' old house. It was for sale, overgrown lawn, paint peeling, empty windows staring back at me. I didn't feel anything. That was the best part.